When Donald Trump demolished the historic East Wing of the White House to build his gaudy new ballroom, he made the American people a promise. He said the whole project would not cost the American taxpayer a dime. Now, sure, like any construction project, it was going to cost money, and building Trump's ballroom was going to cost a lot of money, a whopping $400 million. But it was all going to be paid for by wealthy people and big businesses. Basically, a generous gift out of the kindness of their own hearts. Trump repeated that line over and over, so much so that when his allies eventually proposed spending an additional $1 billion of taxpayer money with a significant chunk of the ballroom security, people freaked out. Even many Republicans couldn't stomach spending $1 billion of taxpayer money on things like a ballroom. And this week, they stripped that $1 billion from their big spending bill. But what if I told you this? The Trump administration had already spent 50 times that much in taxpayer money to build his ballroom. What if I told you Trump had already taken $50 billion out of the U.S. Treasury and spent it? All as part of what looks very much like a pay-to-play scheme to finance his vanity project. And I'm not making this up. A brand new report from the government watchdog group Public Citizen looked into the private donors who are supposedly funding the Trump ballroom as a gift. Guess what their investigation found? Quote, more than half of the publicly identified donors to President Donald Trump's White House ballroom project have won new or expanded federal contracts worth more than $50 billion during the past 6 months. The report also found that most of those same companies are also facing federal enforcement actions over alleged wrongdoing, and that some have had such actions suspended by the Trump administration since the start of Trump's second term. So just to put a fine point on this, these rich donors and corporations gave Trump $400 million to build his ballroom. And then, according to this report, the Trump administration gave those rich donors and corporations $50 billion in taxpayer money in new or expanded government contracts that they were not getting before. And to top it all off, the report says the Trump administration dropped enforcement actions against a few of the companies as well, as if they were paying into a state-sanctioned protection racket. Now, the White House denied a pay-to-play arrangement. But by every appearance, this certainly looks like a duck, and it walks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, too. But that's how Trump sees the federal government. He thinks the federal property and taxpayer money are all his to play with. Today, Trump administration officials were in court defending his big ballroom project. During that hearing, a federal judge asked one of the lawyers for the Trump administration this hypothetical about Trump's authority to unilaterally destroy government property. He says if the government decides very quickly to bulldoze the Statue of Liberty, nothing can be done? The Trump administration lawyer report, quote, I think that's right, yes. Yes, the Trump administration argued today in court that Trump could bulldoze the Statue of Liberty and no law could stop him. It's an audacious claim until you remember that this is the same guy who once had his lawyers argue before the Supreme Court that as president, Trump could assassinate his political rival and be immune from prosecution. And remember, Trump's hand-picked judges on the Supreme Court ultimately agreed with those arguments enough to grant pretty broad presidential immunity. So it's no particular surprise that Trump acts like he's not bound by any rules. Take his latest construction project, the big triumphal arch that he wants to build right in front of Arlington National Cemetery, one that would cast a huge shadow over the graves of American service members. Trump's decision to increase the size of the arch has even alarmed the architect who first proposed the idea, who told the New York Times that Trump's new scale is, quote, way too big for that site. Trump is demanding that his arch be 250 feet tall, despite an existing law that would restrict its height to just 130 feet. But today, Trump's hand-picked Federal Planning Commission decided that that law doesn't apply to Donald Trump's arch. The chairman of that commission, who happens to be Donald Trump's staff secretary, says he's skeptical of the long-accepted legal arguments about the law's applicability to the arch. They're also ignoring concerns about air traffic. As New York Times reports, aviation experts are warning that the arch's height could actually cause problems for the already problem-plagued airspace over Washington, D.C. Remember that just 9 days into Trump's second administration, that very airspace was the site of the deadliest air collision over U.S. territory in decades. You would think Donald Trump would want to avoid any future problems in the airspace over the nation's capital. But Trump is willing to overlook all of those concerns to get his arch, which more than anything else feels like a monument to himself. He craves symbols of his own power, like he's an authoritarian leader in some tin pot dictatorship. And he's never been shy about those aspirations. He openly joked about being a dictator on day one of his presidency. He's the same guy who once said his fake claims of election fraud warranted terminating the Constitution itself. And last year, Donald Trump basically declared himself above the law, saying he who serves his country does not violate any law, as if he is the sole arbiter of what is and is not legal. And Trump has surrounded himself with lackeys who are willing to support that expansive theory of power. Just this week, Trump told his aides to officially begin the process of appointing his former personal attorney, Todd Blanche, to permanently fill the role of Attorney General. And just today, Blanche made it clear that he intends to use that office to shield Donald Trump from accountability for his actions, even after his term ends.
Well, do I believe it's a possibility that the Democrats will go after President Trump, his family, anybody that knows him, anybody that worked for him? I think they've proven that to be true. And what can we do about it is we can just keep on exposing. When we learn about the weaponization that happened for many years, we can keep on exposing it and putting roadblocks in place so it never happens again.
Putting roadblocks in place, not so that it can never happen again, so that Donald Trump cannot be held accountable for his actions. The irony here is that Trump and his administration are acting like Trump is invincible at a time when his popularity is at rock bottom. A new poll out this week finds that 61% of Americans now disapprove of the job that Donald Trump is doing as president. That's a record for Donald Trump in this particular poll. How does the country deal with a president who seems more and more emboldened to grab onto power as the American public continues to lose faith in his ability to lead?